Hello, everyone. Eric Grenier here, and welcome to the 87th episode of the Writ Podcast. On Monday, it's Election Day in Prince Edward Island. Dennis King's PCs are hoping to hold on to the majority government they had, while Peter Bevan-Baker's Greens and Sharon Cameron's Liberals are vying for the official opposition status. To update us on what's been happening in PEI over the last few weeks, I'm joined again by Stuart Neatby, political reporter in PEI for the Saltwire Network and the Charlottetown Guardian. Unfortunately, Teresa Wright wasn't able to join us again this week. But Stu, thanks for joining me so much.
Hey, Eric. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. How has the campaign been? Have you gotten a chance to get on the bus?
No, I still haven't been on the Denny bus. Sadly, I don't think very much media has been on the bus so far, so I cannot confirm or deny what is on the bus.
There have been a few leaders debates. There was the big one, I guess, that was earlier this week for the CBC. There's also been some sort of issue-based debates, one on the economy, one on agriculture. I'd like to get through each of the campaigns, see how the parties are doing, but what was your takeaway from these debates? What did they reveal about this campaign?
Well, the first thing that I've noticed as a pattern is that is the whole sort of like battle for second place dynamic. Like, again, we haven't had a whole lot of polling, but early in the campaign, obviously polls from Narrative and Main Street showed the Denny King and the Tories way ahead. And it's almost been accepted that that is still current. I haven't really seen anything to the contrary. And so much of there was a debate organized by the Chamber of Commerce, on economic issues, obviously the CBC leaders debate, seemed to have kind of the theme of the Liberal leader Sharon Cameron and Green leader Peter Bevan-Baker really duking it out. They, of course, are running against one another in the same district in New Haven, Rocky Point. So the debate sort of seemed to be, to me, who would serve as the better leader of the opposition, with Sharon Cameron castigating Peter Bevan-Baker for not standing up for shoreline protection for cottage owners and sort of the PEI's North Shore. It's a bit of a controversial development up there, or for healthcare, and Peter Bevan-Baker sort of kind of trying to tie both the Conservatives and the Liberals together in terms of past unsuccessful governments. And then, there was Dennis King, I guess, in the middle of it, just sort of passively waiting for an opportunity to say he doesn't want to get in the middle of this little spat. And if you trust somebody with a record, then you should vote for him. So,
and he did literally say that, right? Like, I don't want to get involved in this altercation that was happening on the debate stage.
I'm sure it was very calculated and practiced, but it's the thing I think a lot of voters are going to remember. He's a storyteller by trade, so he knows how to deliver he has good comedic timing, and it works. Yeah, there wasn't really a lot of challenge I found in the CBC leaders debate of Dennis King's record in government. And again, there are things to challenge, It's been a tough 4 years. Like, we've had COVID, we had the Fiona storm, we had potato border blockades, like all kinds of crises. But, healthcare management, you'd stack us probably at the top in terms of provinces of percentage of the population without a family doctor. Wait times for hip and knee replacement are the highest in the country, as near as I can tell. So there are these issues, to pick at in terms of Dennis King's record, but really it sort of seemed the Greens and the Liberals were more interested in picking at each other.
Yeah, so let's maybe take each of the parties one by one just to see how their campaign is going. We'll start with the PCs. Mm-hmm. This was an early campaign. They could have waited until October when it was scheduled to go. They called it about 6 months early. They have a campaign bus, which is apparently a new thing in PEI. I guess you don't usually need a bus to get around the island that quickly. Has this campaign gone to plan for the PCs?
I would say so. There have been definitely hiccups. Organized labor has been a kind of constant presence over the campaign. You have the nurses union who've been out of waiting to conclude bargaining talks for 2 years. So they've been sort of showing up with rallies. Similarly, other education and health workers. The UPEI is on strike. So, the labor's sort of been a bit of a critical role. And I guess, but aside from that, it has sort of seemed like Dennis King has stayed completely on message. He hasn't really moved off of it, which is, here were the disasters. Let me remind you one more time. I walked you through it as a steady hand, and here are some things that we managed to get accomplished. Like a school food program, for example, in schools. I mean, we can sort of get into some of the hiccups, but the opposition, I think, has sort of both the Liberals and the Greens have tried to focus on the attack that the King Conservatives are just not good at managing. They're not good at following through. They're not good at delivering promises. But I'm not convinced that it's really stuck in a sort of concrete way just yet.
One of the hiccups, I guess, was when he was caught on tape discussing with a constituent about trans issues and wasn't being very supportive, to say the least. And that did seem to knock them off stride for a little bit.
Yeah, it did. So this is a strange one. So the audio, I don't know who the constituent is, but the audio appears on a social media account of a former political rival, a guy named Kevin Arsenault, who ran against King for the leadership of the Progressive Conservatives in 2019, before he became premier. And he, at a certain point, is sort of an agrarian activist and worked with the government for a time, but then later becomes kind of an ardent anti, he doesn't support vaccines, doesn't believe their effectiveness. So it seemed pretty calculated to try and embarrass Dennis King. But still, yeah, the audio basically contains, a constituent who sort of seems to believe that, I guess, trans issues are being forced down people's throats. And Dennis appears to be agreeing with him. In the past, Dennis has sort of portrayed himself as kind of like a social progressive, like somebody who, believes in diversity and LGBTQ rights, and it just ran totally contrary to that. Another snippet of audio contained Dennis King saying that he doesn't like the CBC and he would not mind at all if it was taken off the air completely. He can't stand it. When his wife puts it on, he tries to turn it off, kind of thing. And it's very surprising, right? Because it's contrary to the vision, to sort of the image that I think Dennis has sort of portrayed for himself. But I don't know if it's made an impact. Like online, on PEI Twitter, it's sort of a thing, but that's kind of a small group of people. And I'm just not seeing a lot of chatter outside of those channels about these comments. It's not the first time Dennis King has sort of, been caught making embarrassing remarks, on social media or otherwise. But I haven't seen anything that indicates that it's making a huge dent so far.
I suppose it could help the argument from the other parties that there at least needs to be an opposition, because with the kind of polling that we were seeing in the first days of the campaign that were released at that point, a sweep is a potential outcome with the kind of numbers, just because of how it works out with the seats. So for the Greens, it seems like they, in the CBC debate, at least, the Peter Bevan-Baker, in my view, he seemed to be trying to cast himself as a potential premier a little bit more than the Liberal leader. But it is still very much that fight for that second place. But they've also had a few controversies throughout this campaign. So how's it been going for the Greens?
Well, yeah. So the Greens, the funny thing about that debate is this whole issue with the audio about the transphobic comments wasn't raised in the debate. And it hasn't been in any of the other leaders' debates that I've been to. It sort of seemed the other party leaders, Sharon from the Liberals or Peter Bevan-Baker, have sort of shied away from, I guess, publicly questioning Dennis King on that audio. It could be because he was recorded without his consent. I don't know. But so the Greens, yeah, I mean, the biggest hiccup, I think, for the Greens is not being able to field candidates in every riding. They fielded 25 out of 27 districts. They don't have a candidate in one district, which used to be the district of former Liberal Premier Wade McLaughlin. I guess just the response to kind of critiques of that has generally been, well, it was a snap early election and we didn't have time to pull together the organization that we needed. But that, of course, is undercut by the fact that the smaller and less well-organized New Democrats have 27 candidates and they have no seats in the legislature. So, yeah, it's a strange dynamic. I won't say that I guess like the Greens are not attracting candidates, because you're not seeing a whole lot of the same candidates who ran in the last election in 2019. So it's a new crop of, progressive Green types who have sort of stepped up to be candidates in those 25 districts. But they're missing the last two, and you would expect, an opposition party that's had 4 years to organize would have gotten that, basically gotten that squared away. Other than that, I wouldn't say there's been a whole lot of major gaffes. There was one instant where the president of the party seemed to suggest that people in the one district I was talking about with no Green candidate, Stanhope Marshfield, that people spoil their ballot, like write in a candidate in protest. That comment was quickly deleted from social media, and then, her account was completely deleted. But other than that, I can't say there's been a whole lot of gaffes that I have seen in the campaign from the Greens. They've been sort of holding steady to the track of, we've passed a large amount of legislation, 18 bills in 4 years as an opposition party. We've held the government's feet to the fire. Here's the issues. And then sort of trying to lay out a bit of a vision kind of narrative of the potential of PEI kind of thing.
Are there indications that their organization isn't up to snuff? Because I did see there was a story from, I think it was CP, that had a former MLA more or less saying that the party wasn't ready for this campaign.
Well, I think everybody was thinking it. I think Hannah Bell, who was the second Green MLA to be elected in the province's history, and up until this election, a very prominent member of the caucus, I think she just said what everybody already knew. I mean, not fielding 27 candidates is a sign of organizational party weakness. There could be more to it. I have not spoken to Hannah on that subject. I think I tried to ask her about these things when she announced that she was not reoffering, but didn't get a whole lot of an answer. But yeah, I mean, it's when you have an ex MLA basically saying that, I think it's obvious that there's organizational issues in the party.
How about for the Liberals? Because they also are missing two candidates, and one of them is in a seat that they really need to hold. Sorry, I'm thinking more about an incumbent that's not running. I'm thinking of Sonny Gallant. Yeah, not running in Evangeline Mascouche. And but for the Liberals, it seems like for them, they have to really make sure they actually end up winning some seats, right? Because their leader is, as mentioned, running against Peter Bevan-Baker. That's going to be a really hard seat for them to win. They have the other seat, Tignish Palmer Road, that maybe could be one that they could hold because there isn't a Green candidate there. But it does seem like the Liberals need something to save the furniture in this campaign. Yeah,
I would suggest that the Liberals might be in a bit more of a tough spot than the Greens. And the Greens aren't in a great spot. So I just haven't seen debate performance from Sharon Cameron that's really kind of captured people. I heard some people who thought she did well in the CBC leaders debate, but overall there was quite a lot of criticism that she focused a lot of attention on Peter Bevan-Baker instead of Dennis King. I have also heard rumblings from party members that they don't believe that she will win in District 17, New Haven Rocky Point. There are people who really question why the party wasn't able to field a candidate in Stanhope Marshfield, again, the seat of a former Liberal Premier, Wade McLaughlin. So I don't know. I mean, it's sort of funny with the Liberals because I feel that their organization is actually pretty strong. Like, they fundraise way more than the Greens every year in the last 4 years. They fielded quite strong candidates, I felt, in this election. They've got kind of a diverse slate of candidates as well. But there is kind of this issue of the leader. Like they have a structure, they have an organization, they have young activists who are involved with the party. But I'm not so sure that the leader has necessarily galvanized that structure. Like, people have told me that, there's a pancake breakfast, I guess, that Sharon organized in her own district. And the response from Liberal supporters who showed up was polite applause as opposed to sort of like a barn burning kind of, reaction to his speech. So, I'm hearing little things like that. I think they might actually do quite well in the neighboring district in Cornwall Meadowbank. A former party president is running there, and he owns like the local grocery store, and he's extremely well known. But I guess all eyes are on the leader in these things, it's just a question of whether or not she'll be able to, take down. Bevan-Baker is still a pretty popular person, amongst a good chunk of the population.
Is there the chance in that riding that there's a split in the opposition vote that ends up electing a PC?
100%. There is that possibility too. And the PCs will tell you that is one of the districts that they have been really targeting as a pickup. They also will tell you that District 27, Tignish-Palmerone, another Liberal-held district, is one that they're hoping to pick up as well. But yes, they believe that they can pick that district up. Donalda Docherty she's a school bus driver, but has a lot of family connections to the farming community. She has been the subject of some controversy because she, before she ran, tended to sort of retweet, kind of popular, figures on the right who were not supportive of vaccines, like Theo Fleury, Jamie Saleh. People have accused some of her posts, which were of Toronto Sun op-eds, of being racists. Most of it is retweeted content. So that might hurt her in the district. It seems plausible to me that Peter holds it. Like I think I personally, if I were mapping it out, I would put that in Peter's corner. But yeah, there's a possibility that there's a vote split and she comes up the middle.
Just because you mentioned this, it brings up a question. There's the perception that the PCs are much more of a progressive kind of conservative party, and that there isn't all that much difference between them and perhaps the Liberals, or maybe even the Greens, that there isn't a lot of overlap between, a Dennis King and a Pierre Poilievre. But, mentioning those comments that Dennis King made that were captured on recording, and just the comments the retweets that you just saw, is there more of that kind of populism that what we would normally more associate with, the right wing of the Conservative Party federally? Is there more of that in the PEI-PCs than might be generally thought?
There's probably some of it, but I still don't think that, for example, I don't think Dennis King is trying to win votes of PPC supporters on PEI, for example. There isn't really a PPC provincially, but federally they ran candidates. And I don't think that he particularly has that strategy. I think there just are part of the progressive conservative, like the Blue Team Coalition in PEI. Yeah, there are just sort of people who identify with, the right end of the Conservative Party federally. And Donalda just sort of seems like somebody who might fit in that mold. But no, I think the audio snippets, they're interesting, but they more sort of just tell a different story of Dennis King, both likes to sort of portray himself as a progressive socially, but also just somebody who can talk to ordinary working people. And it could well have been that he was just trying to relate to this voter in his district and tried to win him over. It seems odd that he would spend that much time with somebody who's probably not going to agree with him on a lot of things. But no, I don't think this suggests that Dennis King holds transphobic views. I don't think he's in that instance stood up for members of the trans community in PEI. That's very clear. But no, I would still say that the progressive conservatives in PEI under King are more on the progressive end. Don't necessarily have a full affinity for Pierre Poilievre. He, of course, has been nowhere near this election. It's gaffes, I think it's more just a lack of discipline on the part of Dennis King than anything.
Okay, well, we'll go to the New Democrats, who, as you mentioned, are running a full slate, which puts them as only one of two parties, with the PCs doing that. Jagmeet Singh, I do believe, he did a virtual appearance in PEI, so that's at least one federal leader. I thought Michelle Neal did pretty well in the CBC debate, and probably impress, some people who might not have given the NDP much thought. They do have that one riding in Stanhope Marshfield where it is because there's only a PC and a New Democrat. It could end up being, by default, maybe their best result if they don't win the seat with Herb Dickinson in it. But how is it looking for the NDP? Do they have more of a shot to do anything in this campaign than they have in the last few?
This is one of the areas where I'm a little blind. It could be. They could have a shot, I guess. I still think that the one seat that the NDP has held in its entire history in PEI, I think it's Alberton Bloomfield, where Herb Dickinson is running, that is their best shot. It's possible that they could take that. Stanhope Marshfield, I think, is more of a long shot. So they're running Marion White, who's sort of a well-known progressive activist in PEI, against Blois Thompson. Now, Blois Thompson was the Minister of Agriculture during the dispute with the U.S. fresh potato border closure. So he's very well known in the farming community, pretty respected, I have to say, and I would say that people very much remember him for his role in trying to resolve that dispute. So he's a tough opponent. In theory, it's possible that if you look at the 2019 results, sure, there were more people who voted Liberal, Green, and NDP than there were people who voted Tory in that district. So you would think, in theory, some of those voters might go to the NDP, but I don't know. Again, people in the Liberal or Green camp that I talk to, more so the Liberal camp, they'll probably tell you that probably a lot of their votes is going to go to Blois Thompson. So, and then there's the leader, Michelle Neal, who is running in a Charlottetown district, Brighton, which is kind of it's a mix of kind of like very well off people and kind of mid-low income renters sort of thing. The Greens carried it last election, and this election the Tories are running a former leader of the party, Rob Lance. I think she will have a tough time. I think her performance in the debate did impress people. I haven't heard a lot of negative things about it, but it's just tough. It's just a tough district to be running in, and if the polls are correct, then it would suggest that some districts in Charlottetown are going to go blue, and I would think that's probably one of them.
Now, we might see some poll numbers between now and Monday. We haven't seen any since the first few days of the campaign. We're recording this on Thursday at around noon. So if there's something comes out by Thursday evening, then, what I'm about to say might be already out of date. But from the numbers we did see, the last set from Main Street had an enormous lead for the PCs. It was nearly 40 points. And in the narrative polls, which were, not as huge in terms of the lead, still had about 25, 30 points for the PCs. Historically, that kind of thing, especially when you have a divided vote between the opposition parties, could produce a sweep, right?
Yeah.
Is anybody seriously talking about the chances of the PCs going 27 for 27?
Yeah, people are talking about it. I think it was more being talked about at the beginning of the campaign than in the middle. Like there have been real sort of chinks in the armor of Dennis King, like those audio recordings, some of the the labor unrest, so I've heard it less, I guess, since the start of the campaign. It's a possibility. Again, because we're a small jurisdiction, there's not a lot of sort of polling attention on contests here where the outcome is not thought to be where the outcome would be maybe not as in question as in past elections. Personally, I don't think he would sweep all 27 districts. I think that it's a good chance that at least one, or perhaps as many as 3 or 4 districts would stay green. I think the Liberals will keep at least one seat, but it's possible. And I guess we'll see if we get a new poll out in the next day or so, whether or not any of this campaign has made any difference in I guess, the popularity of Dennis King.
Yeah, just one of the reasons also there's a few polls out in the PEI is that it's harder to have an online sample when you're base of population is already so small. You don't want to have the same people taking part in the poll. So that means it leaves it to the IVR, the telephone pollsters, and there's fewer of those who do polls. Okay, so Monday's election day. The advanced turnout seems to have been lower than last time. It's still pretty good. You still have, I think, about 20 or 25% of people have already voted.
It's not that different. Like, it's a bit lower than last time, but last time was a change election. Like, you had three competitive parties. So it's a bit surprising. It's a bit higher than I thought it would be.
Well, then there's interest. So which ridings, which districts are the ones that you find will be the most interesting? If it is primarily about how many opposition members can be elected, which ones are the ones you think are going to decide that?
Right. Okay. So number one with the bullet is New Haven Rocky Point, the contest between Green leader Peter Bevan-Baker and Liberal leader Sharon Cameron. I think most of the island will be watching that more than any other district. Other districts that I think matter are the two Stratford districts. Stratford is sort of a suburb of Charlottetown, sort of across the bridge. And there's two districts in play. One is Green held, one is Tory held, but the Tory MLA has retired. I think those are interesting green-blue contests. I'm also looking, as I mentioned, at Charlottetown Brighton, which is where the NDP leader is running against a former Tory leader. And, we have pretty decent candidates, both from the Liberal and Green parties. So it's one to watch as well. Lastly is Summerside. I mean, Summerside is, another it's the second biggest city in Prince Edward Island, still pretty small by most of everybody else's standards, but it's about an hour outside of Charlottetown. Shocked everybody in 2019 by going green. You had 3 seats that went green in areas that people thought were Liberal strongholds. I don't know what's going to happen there. I have no clue. But I'll be looking to see if the Green can hold on to any of those 3 seats.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is expecting the PCs will win another majority, but it doesn't mean there's not going to be some interesting storylines on election night, like in every election, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. I mean, there's going to be new people in the legislature. I mean, we had, 3, 4 incumbents who decided that they were not going to reoffer. So with that comes a lot of interesting stories about why they stepped up now and took the plunge. And
potentially the fate of some leaders will also be decided.
Certainly the fate of at least one.
At least
possibly
one.
Possibly 2. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm certainly going to be watching, so I appreciate you coming on the podcast and explaining it to us, and hope you have a good election night.
Hey, thanks. Well, this was fun. Thanks for taking the interest. I really appreciate it.